Excellent. Welcome everyone to our webinar on the Capital Magnet Fund, getting ready to apply. Today, we have the Capital Magnet Fund team. This is part of our annual funding round kickoff process. I'm Andrew Schlack. I am the program manager of the Capital Magnet Fund, joined by my colleagues here who will be leading our presentation, including Sarah Ferraro, Phyllis Brown, Joe Joy with the CMF name, and Elizabeth Hoffman. And the team will be going through a series of slide content. We've got plenty of time at the end to answer questions. So at this point, I'd ask for the next slide, and we are recording this. And if anyone has any concerns about being recorded, you're welcome to disconnect at this time, and the recording will be available shortly after this presentation up on the CDFI Fund website. So look for this. We'll show you how to get to where the content will be posted when it's available. But before we get into the heart of today's agenda, which is, again, setting folks up for success in getting ready to apply for the Capital Magnet Fund fiscal year 2024, which we're calling CMF round number 9. A couple of housekeeping items here that I just want to take care of up front. So again, these rules just ask everyone to sort of pay attention, and we will enforce them, turning off cameras and muting people as appropriate. But we would ask that everyone who's not speaking, please go on mute as a courtesy to your fellow participants. We're going to hold all questions and answers to following this slide deck presentation. We have 30 to 40 slides. Seems longer, but we'll get through the content. We'll have plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. We would ask that people ask their questions orally, just given that not everyone, some people might be dialing in and people can't read the chat. So again, when Joe facilitates us at the end, please ask your questions orally. Please refrain from any, emoticon party symbols or whatever can be distracting to some of the presenters. So please suspend your animation, if you will. And then again, the host, which is Joe, is available. Joe, if you want to raise again, if somebody wants to send, you're having technical issues and you need to chat with somebody directly, you can reach out directly to CMF, which will put you in direct contact with Joe. So we'll go to the next slide. And at this point, just before I pass it over to Sarah, who will get us kicked off, things that we won't cover today. So again, this is a kickoff to the next fiscal year 2024 CMF round 9. So we will not be talking about past funding round or award decisions. We don't have any additional information at this point about the fiscal year 2024 NOFA or any changes therein. I will say that all of the 2023 materials are currently posted on the website. So for folks that are new to the Capital Magnet Fund program, it will substantially be similar, but there will be important differences. Those differences just have not been published yet, but if you, after this call, would like further information, we're going to show you how to get to that information. It just happens to be last year's information, which is a standard that we use until this year's materials are available. Thirdly, we're not going to talk about any existing compliance or reporting questions on existing awards. We've got colleagues from the Capital Magnet Fund compliance team on this call. But again, the purpose of this call is to look forward to our 2024 round. Again, they're available via service request and other methods of contacting. So ask that you not ask questions, and we won't cover material relevant to past compliance awards. And then lastly, we don't have the application in AMIS yet, so we won't be entertaining any questions related to how to enter your data into our awards management and information system, which is the instrument used to collect the application when it's available. So with those ground rules on what we're not going to cover, let's get into the fun part, which is what we are going to cover. And kicking us off here is Sarah Ferraro. Sarah.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and take off my video as we present these slides. So now I'm going to go over the agenda for the rest of today's call. First, we're going to have a program overview, which will really just give a nice overview of CMF. Then we'll have the preparing to apply for CMF steps. And then, of course, have that dedicated question and answers and next steps at the end of today's session. So if you go to the next slide, we can dive in. So first, we just want to zoom out and to discuss how CMF fits into the CDFI Fund's mission and vision. So the CDFI Fund's mission is to expand economic opportunity for underserved people and communities by supporting the growth and capacity of a national network of community development lenders, investors, and financial service providers. The vision of the CDFI Fund is an America in which all people and communities have access to the investment capital and financial services they need to prosper. Now, CMF is just one of the many CDFI programs, and it was created to spur private investment in affordable housing and related economic development efforts to revitalize neighborhoods across the country by serving low-income families and communities. Next slide. So the purpose of the Capital Magnet Fund is that it provides competitively awarded grants to CDFIs and eligible nonprofit organizations to attract private capital for and increase investment in, first, the development, rehabilitation, preservation, and purchase of affordable housing, both home ownership and rental, targeted to low, very low, and extremely low-income families. And second, the economic development activities designed to stabilize and or revitalize areas of economic distress, such as renovated buildings that will house neighborhood businesses and community service facilities. Next slide. So a bit of history about CMF. CMF was established through the Housing and Economic Recovery Act, also known as HERA, of 2008. And the source of funding for CMF comes from the allocation from the government-sponsored enterprises, also known as GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So prior CMF rounds were conducted in 2010 with subsequent funding rounds annually from, we can see your screen, Joe, just so you know, from 2016 through FY21, as well as in FY 2023. The next round will be, we can see that as well. The next round will be the 9th CMF funding round. Next slide, please. So for CMF, leveraging private financing is key. So CMF spurs investments from banks, foundations, private investors, and state and local governments to support affordable housing and economic development. By statute, for every $1 in CMF funding, recipients are required to generate at least $10 in leveraged capital. FY 2017 recipients recently completed the 5-year investment period, and they secured over $3.2 billion in private investment, generating over $30 of private leverage capital for every $1 of CMF funding. Next slide. So let's talk about the eligible activities supported by CMF. CMF awards are used to finance and support affordable housing activities and/or economic development activities through the following eligible activities. First, to provide loan loss reserves. Second, to capitalize a revolving loan fund. Third, to capitalize an affordable housing fund. Fourth, to capitalize a fund to support economic development activities. Fifth, for risk sharing loans. And finally, to provide loan guarantees. Next slide. There's several award restrictions and timelines to keep in mind as you prepare for the next round. The restrictions, which are from the FY23 NOFA, and as Andrew mentioned, the FY24 NOFA is not out yet, but by and large will be the same. So first restriction is no more than 30% of a CMF award may be used for economic development activities. Second, no more than 5% of a CMF award may be used for direct administrative expenses. And third, housing finance and or supported by CMF is subject to a 10-year affordability period. So for timelines for use, the CMF award must be fully committed to projects within 2 years. There must be an initial disbursement of the CMF award to at least one housing or economic development project within 3 years. And then CMF finance projects must all be complete within 5 years. Next slide. And next, let's talk about some of the eligibility factors. To be eligible to apply for a CMF award, an applicant must either be certified as a CDFI by the CDFI Fund, or be a nonprofit organization having as one of its principal purposes the development or management of affordable housing. All applicants must have been in existence as a legally formed entity for at least 3 years prior to the application deadline. All applicants must submit audited financial statements for its 2 most recent historic fiscal years as of the date of the NOFA. I do want to highlight that because this is an important one. Must submit audited financial statements for its 2 most recent historical fiscal years as of the date of the NOFA. And then finally, the applicant must meet all eligibility requirements on its own behalf and may not rely on any affiliates or subsidiaries to meet this requirement. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about leveraging capital. So in community development finance, the term leverage means the ability to use capital from other sources to maximize public resources. For CMF, the recipients are required to leverage their CMF award at a ratio of at least 10-1. So for example, an award of $5 million must generate at least $50 million in eligible project costs. The sources of this capital leveraged by the CMF award may be loans from banks, program-related investments from foundations, low-income housing tax credit investments, funds contributed by the recipient itself, state or local governments, or any number of other private or public sources. And the combination of the CMF award and leverage costs makes up the eligible project costs for the CMF program. Next slide, please. So over this overarching leverage umbrella, there's 3 different types of leverage that we ask about in the application. First is enterprise level leverage. This is capital that's earned, borrowed, or raised by the applicant, which is designated for the applicant's use and ultimately used to pay for leverage cost, but it is not initially restricted for use for specific properties at the time it's earned, borrowed, or raised. So enterprise level leverage, private leverage, examples of that can include capital raised from private sources, which is invested in or loaned to the applicant and allocated to a CMF-related housing fund or similar financing activities. Examples include loans from financial institutions, program-related investments from foundations, retained earnings, or equity. For enterprise level public leverage, that would be grants, loans, or other investments to the applicant from state, local, or other federal government programs, which is loan or contributed to a CMF-related housing fund or similar financing activity. Next slide. Second type of leverage is reinvestment leverage. And this means the redeploying of repaid CMF award dollars and/or enterprise level capital redeployed into projects that achieve project completion during the 5-year investment period. Recipients are required to reinvest any principal or equity repayments of the CMF award dollars into eligible activities during the 5-year investment period. Next slide. And then finally, the last type of leverage is project level leverage. And this is capital that's used to pay leverage costs that is restricted to a specific project when it is raised. So private examples of project level leverage include capital raised from private sources, which is invested in or loaned to a specific project. For example, this could include loans from a financial institution secured by the real estate and investments through the sale of low-income housing tax credits. For public project level leverage, that could be grants, loans, or other investments for a specific project from state, local, or other federal government programs. Next slide, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Phyllis.
Thank you, Sarah. The primary objective of the Capital Magnet Fund is to finance affordable housing. CMF awards may be used to finance both rental and homeownership affordable housing. Rental housing may be multifamily, 5 units or more, or single family. And while most rental housing is developed as one property, scattered site development is permitted. Homeownership is usually single family housing, 4 units or less. This may include single family detached, condominium, cooperative, and manufactured housing. Next slide. There are many diverse ways to use a CMF award. including the following examples. Many recipients set up loan funds that may be used for pre-development funding, construction loans, bridge financing, or permanent debt. Some recipients blend the CMF award with a larger financing pool, bringing down the overall interest rate to borrowers. Others use the CMF award as a loan loss reserve or subordinate gap financing to reduce the risk to private investors. And finally, some provide down payment and closing cost assistance to first-time home buyers. Next slide. Another priority of the Capital Magnet Fund is the financing and/or development of housing that is affordable to families and individuals with low, very low, or extremely low income. Low-income families are those families with incomes at or below 80% of the area median income, or AMI. Very low-income families are those families with incomes at or below 50% of the AMI. Extremely low-income families are those families with incomes at or below 30% of the AMI. The maximum income for CMF financed housing is 120% of AMI. Next slide. For housing assisted with a CMF award, affordability must be met in several ways. The maximum income level for eligible income families may not exceed 120% of AMI. In multifamily rental projects, at least 20% of the units must be set aside for families with incomes at or below 80% of AMI. Further income targeting may be established in the CMF NOFA. 100% of total eligible project cost must be attributable to units that serve eligible income families. Greater than 50% of the eligible project cost must be attributable to units that serve families at low, very low, and extremely low incomes. Eligible project costs is comprised of the cost paid for with the CMF award dollars plus the leveraged costs. Next slide. In addition to income limits and income targeting benchmarks, the CMF program has additional requirements which include long-term restrictions. Each project must be affordable for at least 10 years. For rental housing, this is accomplished through deed restrictions, land covenants, or other mechanisms which survive sale and transfer during the affordability period. For home ownership, the recipient must develop its own plan for achieving this 10-year affordability in the event of resale. As far as rents, while families must meet the income limits at the time of initial occupancy, the rents control affordability. Rents are set using a formula similar to that used for low-income housing tax credits. The purchase price limits for home ownership are capped at 95% of the median purchase price for the area as determined by HUD. Next slide. Now here are some requirements for rental housing. CMF funds may be used to develop, acquire, renovate, and preserve affordable rental housing. Rental housing may be multifamily or single-family housing. Mixed income development is allowed with maximum income for CMF-assisted units at 120% of AMI. Any rental property that's financed or supported with a CMF award must retain its affordability for at least 10 years. At least 20% of the units of multifamily rental projects must be occupied by low-income families. And finally, rents are controlled and must be set at levels affordable to the applicable income level. The rent levels are calculated using the same formula as that used for low-income housing tax credits. Next slide. And now the requirements for home ownership. CMF awards may be used to help individuals and families buy a home, as well as to develop, preserve, or rehabilitate homeownership units. Down payment loans, first and second mortgages, and other purchase assistance is allowed. In addition, CMF awards may help support the development and construction of owner-occupied housing. Condominiums, cooperatives, mutual housing, and manufactured housing are acceptable forms of homeownership. The purchase price is limited to 95% of the median price in the area as determined by HUD. The property must remain affordable for 10 years. Recipients must impose resale or recoupment restrictions to ensure that the 10 years of affordability is achieved. Next slide. Now let's talk about some economic development activities. CMF awards finance affordable housing activities as well as related economic development activities, or EDAs, including the financing of community service facilities. Recipients can use no more than 30% of their CMF awards for economic development activities. CMF awards may only be used for the financing and/or support of projects and may not be used as grants or loans to businesses. Next slide. Some examples of eligible economic development activity structures and community service facilities include, but are not limited to, daycare centers and schools, grocery stores, health clinics, food banks, community centers, workforce development centers, facade improvements, and the revitalization of commercial buildings. Next slide. Economic development activities must be developed in conjunction with affordable housing activities, meaning that the community service facility or neighborhood-based business must be, 1, physically proximate. For a metropolitan area, this means being located within the same census tract or within 1 mile of the affordable housing. And for a non-metropolitan area, this means being located in the same county or within 10 miles of the affordable housing. And secondly, it must be reasonably available to residents of affordable housing. Next slide. Economic development activities in conjunction with affordable housing activities must implement a concerted strategy to stabilize or revitalize a low-income area or underserved rural area. So what's concerted strategy? It's a formal planning document that evidences the connection between affordable housing activities and economic development activities. These documents include, but are not limited to, a comprehensive plan, a consolidated plan, or redevelopment plan, or some other local or regional planning document adopted or approved by the jurisdiction. Next slide. Well, that covers our program overview, and now I'm going to toss it over to Elizabeth to cover how to prepare to apply for a CMF award. Elizabeth?
Great, thank you, Phyllis. So many of you probably received the notice about this webinar, indicated we are tentatively planning to open our CMF round in 2024 calendar year, but there are some things you can do now to prepare to apply. If you have not obtained your EIN, your employer identification number, or your UEI, your unique identity identifier, that's from the IRS and from SAM.gov respectively, you will want to do that as soon as possible. That can take a little bit of a long time. Once you have those, you will register or update your accounts in the following systems: SAM.gov, grants.gov, and AMIS. It's always good to make sure that those are up to date. I believe SAM needs to be renewed. AMIS, we know sometimes there's staff transitions. You can go ahead and clean up your contacts now so that all the right people are on the email list. As Andrew mentioned at the start of the call, The NOFA and application materials from last year, the FY 2023 round, are still available on the program website. That will give you a general idea of or the provisions of CMF, although there could be some changes when the 2024 NOFA is published. Next slide. So once you have your EIN and UEI numbers, you will need to make sure that they match, that they are correct in all your systems, SAM.gov, grants.gov, and AMIS. We reserve the right to reject an application if the numbers don't match. That's always a very sad day for us if somebody has a little boo-boo. And we do have to reject your application if you submit under a parent or affiliate organization's number. So this is a great time to check all your numbers. Next slide. Okay, if you are a new user to SAM.gov, that is the System for Award Management. That's a component for all federal grants programs. You should register as soon as possible, like today when you get off the call, because it can take a couple weeks. Existing users, again, go ahead and make sure your account is active and up to date. If organizations do not register or reactivate their account on time, they might be unable to submit the SF 424 form by the deadline, and we cannot extend if it's an instance of just delay from not registering in time. If you have any questions about SAM.gov, that is a government-wide system not maintained by the CDFI fund, so you'll need to contact their federal service desk directly for help. Next slide. I think I might have covered some of this already, but you can begin your SAM registration now. Yes, it could take 4 weeks or longer to either get a new account or to reactivate. So go to the SAM.gov website registration if you are not having a SAM registration or not sure if you're currently active. Next slide. Okay, the grants.gov system is another government-wide system, and there is a key component of the application called the SF 424 that must be submitted through grants.gov. This deadline is typically 30 days after the NOFA is published, and if it is not successfully accepted, your application will be deemed ineligible. When you submit that SF 424, you must submit it under the correct program funding number. And note that the SF 424 asks for the amount of money that you're going to apply for CMF. If there's a difference, if you set $1 million, but then decide in AMIS to apply for $2 million, we consider the amount in AMIS. So in terms of the SF 424 award amount, if there's a difference, then AMIS is the definitive one for us. Next slide. Okay, speaking of AMIS, if you are brand new to us at CDFI Fund, you might not know the joy that is the Awards Management Information System. This is our software package that does all aspects of our grant application award process. Your organization needs to be registered, and all of the application materials except that SF 424 will be submitted through grants.gov. So as part of getting that set up, if you're new to AMIS, you must have your EIN and your UEI number entered. That due date is the same date that the SF 424 is due in grants.gov. Again, typically about a month after NOFA publication. You need to have an authorized representative in AMIS. That is someone who is legally able to sign documents on your organization's behalf. It cannot be a consultant. And it's important to keep your account up to date so that you can successfully submit your application and receive email information. One tip, sometimes our email address that it comes from, AMIS at cdfi.treas.gov, goes to spam. So if you want to take the time to add that as a safe sender to your email system, then you can ensure those important communications will come through to you. Next slide. Okay, this is new. Well, the Civil Rights Act, of course, is not new. But the Title VI compliance worksheet that shows how organizations are implementing the Civil Rights Act is a new requirement for the CDFI fund. This is something that is going to help us ensure that all our applicants are prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs or activities receiving financial assistance from the Department of the Treasury. You're going to need to do a Title VI compliance worksheet in AMIS on an annual basis for every calendar year. So just to clarify, if you were to go into AMIS now, you could do a Title VI worksheet, but it would be for calendar year 2023. We know that the CMF application is not coming until calendar year 2024. So you should absolutely look at the questions and start to think about them. But you, whenever you apply from now on for a grant-based CDFI program, the calendar year, the date that you submit your application, you're going to need a Title VI for that calendar year. So if anybody listening on this call is also considering applying for the Small Dollar Loan Program, which is another CDFI fund program that's due in 2 weeks, you would want to go ahead and fill out that 2023 Title VI worksheet. And then sadly, you will have to fill out a new one for us for 2024. And then that would be for CMF or any other grant-based programs that open in calendar year 2024. So I know we'll probably be getting lots of questions on this since it's a new requirement, but I'm going to ask Joe to go ahead and click our hyperlink, or well, to show us on the website. We have the slides, and this recording will be posted in a day or two, and it'll be hyperlinked there for you. But currently the CMF compliant, or pardon me, this is CDFI fund-wide. The CDFI fund Civil Rights Compliance Worksheet. This is a paper version of it. You'll complete it in AMIS. But Joe, if you scroll down, we can see there are questions such as, have any civil rights lawsuits and or administrative complaints that allege discrimination been brought against you? So when you have this in AMIS, if you were to check yes, there would be a text box where you could, write about that and how you've addressed it and whatnot, but hopefully most folks will check no. So this worksheet, you can preview the questions, which again, if you're only considering applying for CMF, you'll want to fill this out in AMIS in 2024. And Joe can show us as well on our CMF webpage. So currently the step 2 apply section seems a little out of date because it still has 2023 materials. We will be posting this webinar for kicking off 2024 soon, but we have gone ahead down at the bottom. Joe's highlighted it for us and put these questions on, then you can just open it so that since this is new, we wanted folks to have plenty of advance notice and be able to see those questions. Okay. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. We will take some time during question and answer, certainly if folks have Title VI. When these slides are posted, oh, sorry, if you can go back one slide, Joe. When these slides are posted in a few days, you'll see there's a second link down there in the last bullet in yellow. We also made an AMIS user guide showing you, the link right below it, Joe. And that has screenshots in AMIS of exactly where Title VI is going to be. You'll go into your organization, you'll go to your related tab. I think we're all starting to finally get used to the new Lightning system that the Salesforce rolled out for us in AMIS. So we've tried our best to have all the resources that you could need to make the Title VI a very easy new worksheet about something that we've all been doing to prevent discrimination. Okay, next slide. Okay, reminder. So there are going to be 2 major deadlines and 2 systems. The grants.gov SF 424, that usually is about 30 days after the NOFA drops. And then the full program application will be about 60 days typically after the NOFA drops. That one is through AMIS. So you'll need to make sure you do both of those 2 steps if you would like to apply for CMF in 2024. Next slide, please. After the NOFA is published, we can fill in that nice little TBD date. And this is just a reminder of the things that you'll need to do. That Title VI worksheet will need to be completed, but at the same date as the SF 424 for our CMF program. So, again, once you can start to look at those questions now in December, Once January hits, you can go ahead and put in a 2024 compliance worksheet Title VI in your AMIS account. But the rest of the program materials, the application questions and the data tables and the projections and whatnot, those are due a little bit later to give you some more time. Next slide. Okay, with that, I will turn it back over to Joe.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. So now we are going to have our questions and next steps section. So just a reminder, before we open the floor for questions, the best way to contact us is to submit a service request in AMIS. And when you're submitting that, if it's Capital Magnet Fund specific, you'll have the opportunity to select Capital Magnet Fund when you submit the service requests, and it will be read and answered by the friendly faces that you're seeing on the screen today. You can also email us at cmf@cdfi.treas.gov. However, we only really recommend you use that if you say are just getting started with AMIS and have questions about it. Essentially, once you have AMIS set up properly, which you all need to do if you want to apply, we recommend you submit a service request through your AMIS account. We also recommend you watch for the Notice of Funding Availability, what we affectionately call the NOFA, in the Federal Register, excuse me, and register in GovDelivery to hear about additional webinars and CDFI fund announcements, such as that the Capital Magnet Fund application is open. That's something that comes out on these great GovDelivery announcements. So here's the link to subscribe to those GovDelivery announcements if you aren't already. And again, this presentation with all these helpful links will be posted on our Step 2 Apply page in about a week or so. All right. So before we open the floor to questions, we're gonna just remind everyone of the ground rules. Please follow them. We have over 100 wonderful participants on today, so we want everything to work smoothly. So to answer a question, you should be able to raise your hand, and that will put you to the top of my list to answer the questions. Wait till I call on you. I'm going to try to say everyone's names correctly, but I might not. And then once I call on you, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. You're welcome to turn your camera on, but there's no pressure. And then again, please do not put questions in the chat unless you're having audio issues when it's your turn to speak. If you're not able to verbally ask your question for whatever reason, you can put it in the chat, and we will try to answer it to the group. If the Q&A session ends before your question is answered, please submit your questions to us via service request, or if you don't have an AMIS account yet, you're welcome to use that CMF email address as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Oh, and then the reminder. Andrew, do you want to go through this slide or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, just thanks, Joe. Just a courtesy reminder for folks who may have joined a little late. Again, we're not going to dabble into these items that are up on the screen, you know, why you didn't get a past award, specific details about this year's NOFA. And Joe, I see there's a couple of questions. Do you want to navigate to just pull up the 2023 NOFA? And I think it's helpful sometimes to just demo to people how you can find the answer to your question. And I'll do that specifically around one question that's in the chat. And again, just a courtesy reminder on the chat to ask your questions orally, but I'm going to actually use this NOFA, which Joe is pulling up as the 23 NOFA, so that when you do have questions about, hey, what does it mean to be a nonprofit housing developer, which is one of the questions that I'll start with answering while people are queuing up their questions. I'll show people, a best practice is to go to the NOFA from last year, and we'll answer that question. So those are the things that we're not going to cover. And I see quite a few people have put things in the chat. So let me play a little bit of catch up. And I'm going to start with a question that was posed by, I just had it. Now there's a lot of questions from Frank Cornier. We are not a CDFI. What constitutes an eligible nonprofit organization? So great question, Frank. My suggestion to everyone on the call, and this is why I just wanted to demo this really quick, Joe, is to go to the NOFA. The NOFA is, for folks that are new to this process, the Notice of Fund Availability from the federal government basically establishes the ground rules. And so a lot of these sorts of technical questions will be defined in our NOFA, and you can just do a Control F, like find a keyword. The answer to your question, Frank, is on table 2. It's under eligibility requirements. And here's the definition that CMF uses to be a nonprofit organization. You might need to zoom in a little bit, Joe, so that they can see it. But the big test, Frank, for your purposes, primary purpose, of course, affordable housing, documented through your articles of incorporation, right? You're a nonprofit organization that demonstrates management of affordable housing is among its principal purposes. And then the key test here that we use as the sort of litmus test, the watershed, if you will, is demonstrates by providing an attestation that at least a third of your assets are dedicated to the development and management of affordable housing. So again, I just wanted to pull this up. A lot of the questions that folks are going to ask today, if you're new to this process and we don't get to respond to your question orally today in the webinar, best practice is to go to the NOFA and to go to all the other past resources that are provided up there. And again, as the team has shared, this is subject to change, right, with the 2024 NOFA, but, we're sharing it will be substantially similar. So, things like this will not be changing, but there will be other important nuances. When the 24 materials are available, we will parking lot this 23 to reduce confusion. So I answered Frank's question. And again, I'm going to ask that people not chat to the questions and raise your hand. But for Elizabeth's benefit, while people are still joining, I've got a couple of questions here on Title VI. And again, this is the CMF program team. And for questions on Title VI, this is a new CDFI fund-wide and Department of Treasury data collection instrument. So we know, this is new, right, for Capital Magnet Fund. There will be some questions that we're not going to be able to answer, but we will guide you and direct you. Compliance will be able to, the CDFI Fund compliance team would be able to answer these questions. So Elizabeth, I'll read these questions just so that they go on record, and I'll let you to respond to them, or we'll just take a pass at them and then follow up. So a question is it a requirement that applicants answer all the questions affirmatively in the Title VI worksheet? And I'll pass that one over to Elizabeth.
Great. That's a good question. And the answer is no, but also it depends on the question whether a good answer is going to be a yes or a no, right? Like the first question we looked at, has your organization had any civil rights lawsuits filed against it? The preferred answer there probably would be no. There are other questions. For example, question 2B is, do you make information available on your website informing persons of their rights under Title VI? So for that, it says, if no, please describe the applicant's plan to make this information available online. So for each of the yes, no questions, there is a text box. And if there are some pieces like that about posting things on website, there's an option to discuss your plan for doing so if it's not something that has currently been done.
Excellent. Thanks, Elizabeth. And the second canned question here in the chat, and then I'm going to let Joe get to the people that have their hand raised. Another Title VI question, Elizabeth, is the Title VI form required to file our 2023 annual report? And I can take this one. So this is a requirement for new grant applicants. And I think when you say your 2023 annual report, you're probably referring to your certification or past grant compliance reporting. So new, if you're applying, as Elizabeth indicated, for small dollar loan program, that's going to be a 2023. You have to fill out that form to apply for small dollar. and then you will need a 2024 form. But there is no requirement that, hey, I got an FA award back in 2021, or I'm a certified CDFI. Do I need to provide this form? This is for new grant applications. So those are the two Title VI questions. Elizabeth, do you have a clarifying? Yeah.
Yes, Andrew, we've got one more question from Katrina on the Title VI. And she is asking about, as an authorized representative, the only one who can submit the Title VI worksheet? I don't honestly know that, but the second part of your question, where will AMIS show the form has been done? So it's not going to be in the reports section. It is going to be its own new independent object in the related tab. So when you go to your organization in the related tab, that's where you'll see the SF 424, your program profiles, all sorts of different things. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there will be one called Title VI now, and it'll show very clearly, if, for example, if you have one for 2023 and 2024, or if you create one in 2024, it'll list them both there. So to Katrina's questions on AMIS, that is where it will be. And there are the AMIS guides on the website are linked in this PowerPoint that we will be posting shortly. If you also go to cdfifund.gov and search for the non-discrimination page, there is a little set of the 3 resources there. So you can see what it looks like in AMIS with screenshots if you have questions on that.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Super helpful. So again, this is the whole Title VI, it's managed by the CDFI compliance team. And so I'll just create a clear line between what the Capital Magnet Fund program is speaking to is basically what's available and known. Some of these more technical questions are best answered by the CDFI fund compliance team. So we'll refer you over there. So at this point, Joe, I think we're ready to address the folks with their hands raised if you want to help coordinate.
All right, so the first question is from Sam Dyer. Sam, if you want to unmute and ask your question now.
Thank you. I had questions about the areas of economic distress, if there had been any changes to the criteria or geographic flexibility since the last application round.
So this goes, Joe, do you want to bring up our slides of things we won't cover? Because again, we can speculate, right? But there's documents that are still going through approval. And so you're starting to dabble into the areas that it's not approved yet. So it's not really relevant to talk about right now. Rest assured though, as soon as the NOFA is available, we will be providing a kickoff webinar where we're going to go over the content of the rules and requirements and criteria for the 2024 NOFA. So Sam, I hope that's a
Yes, thank you.
Adequate answer. Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, next question is from Sunshine Mathon.
Good afternoon, thanks, and I apologize for putting my questions also in the chat. I put them in there before I got direction not to. My apologies. But the question I have is whether if CMF were utilized for down payment assistance, whether it still has to meet the 10-to-1 leverage criteria. So in other words, the down payment assistance could be no more than 10% of the housing price. I think that's my interpretation. I just want to confirm that. And then I have a second part follow up to that.
Okay, I'd love it if one of my teammates wants to answer. I'll tag in somebody. I'm just going to pick Sarah and then can compliment. Yep.
Sure. So the eligible project cost requirement for 10-to-1 is measured at the portfolio level. So it's not required on a house by house or project by project, whether rental or home ownership. So keep that in mind. But generally, yes, for every $1 of CMF, there needs to be $10 in eligible project costs. So for home ownership, that definitely need to keep that in mind. That could include the first mortgage, any other types of related eligible project costs, but that is definitely something you need to keep in mind. Does that answer your question?
I think so, and I think that it also answers my follow-up, but let me just confirm. The follow-up then is, let's say we were using CMF dollars to fund the project development of a single house. And then additionally, we were also using CMF dollars for down payment assistance. And if the individual who got the down payment assistance was buying a house also funded on development side, we would potentially have to, it would potentially compromise the 10-to-1 ratio if both ways of using the CMF were applied to the same house. Does that question make sense?
I think so. So the way that, it works at EMS, you would have the total amount of CMS investment per unit, right? So if you're doing that both from a development standpoint as well as a down payment assistant, you're going to be combining those totals for the amount of CMF investment into one unit or a project. So in that case, I would say yes, because the total eligible project cost will remain the same, even if you're assisting in the development and then the down payment assistance. So that could complicate it. It could potentially bring down your leverage depending on the costs associated with development. Now, keep in mind, you'd be able to not only include the first mortgage, you'd also be able to include the development costs. So from that point of view, your EPCs could be a little bit larger. So there could be a bit of a balance there.
Got it. Thank you.
Excellent.
All right, so the next question goes to, or comes from, moreover, Michael Morgan. You're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's two questions. The first one, for fiscal year 24, when is the deadline for the application? And I asked that because I know that the New Market Tax Credit app is due, I believe, on the 19th of this month. That's question one. And the second question, is this similar to the New Market Tax Credit?
So Michael, why don't I just the scheduling question. So again, our NOFA is not published. All of the due dates, et cetera, are subject to the publication of the NOFA. They'll be stipulated there as the ground rules, if you will, for what the application requirements are. Typically, though, once the NOFA is published, there are two deadlines that will get set in the NOFA. The first one to be mindful of is an SF-424 deadline. That's typically 30 days after the NOFA is published. And then the second deadline is when the application itself is due in EMIS, and that's typically 60 days after the NOFA is published. And so the clock really starts with the publication of the NOFA. And I have it on fairly good authority, if you know what I mean, that the NOFA will be published sometime in early 2024. Typically we'll have these, kickoff webinar like we're having today when, documents are going through clearance and approval, but many slip between cup and lip, as they say, and there's a chance that there's a delay. And so we don't set those deadlines until it actually gets published in the Federal Register, but that's the indication of timing. As far as the overlap with New Markets Tax Credit, we do our best to manage to that across the CDFI fund, across, the various programs. But honestly, it's impossible to sort of block out large swaths of time where there is no overlap. I'll say that we do coordinate to make sure that it's not a perfect overlap. So there will be some overlap, but it's not like we're only going to have the same, dates that are set. There will be some difference to allow people to work. We certainly are open to that, because people work on multiple applications at the same time. And then your question about what's the difference between New Markets Tax Credit and the Capital Magnet Fund. Again, I would just refer back to the materials, but in concept, New Market Tax Credit, they're administering a tax credit authority, right? And so it's a different financing mechanism, and it's a different, review process. And there are different sort of programmatic goals and objectives that are sponsored through New Markets. Conversely, the CMF program, like the Financial Assistance Program, like the Equitable Recovery Program, we are administering a grant program. And so the Capital Magnet Fund program is a grant program rather than a tax credit allocation. So that's the fundamental difference. And then there's a lot of other nuanced difference. But as our presentation today went over, we're primarily in affordable housing. We do have some concession for 30% of your award can be used for economic development. And again, that's definitely a difference between what's sort of the funding priority or what the goal objectives of New Markets is compared to the Capital Magnet Fund. Again, Capital Magnet Fund really focusing on housing first, and then economic development in conjunction, right, with affordable housing. So broad strokes there, but I hope that response was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
All right, next question comes from Emma Tinsley. You're welcome to unmute.
Thank you. I have a couple quick questions, and I think my first one you may have just answered, but we received an email a little over a month ago about the financial assistance program coming out shortly. Should we anticipate that program, NOFA, coming out before or after the Capital Magnet Fund, if you're able to answer that?
I'm not going to go out on a limb and answer that, but given when the timing of those emails that you got, I think you're reaching a reasonable conclusion. That's as far as I'll go. Again, many a slip between cup and lip, and we just we can't put ourselves in that position because, it's all subject to change, but that's as much as we can answer today.
Okay, thank you. And then wondered, and I apologize if this is published somewhere else, but I didn't see it in the award book from last year. Are you able to confirm whether there were any awardees that used the consortium approach last year to apply? And if that was a successful approach?
Joe, would you like to respond?
Yes, we had two consortium approach applicants for the fiscal year 2023 round, and those same two applicants became recipients as well. So it was a successful for both of those two, but that's not just because they use the approach. We take the full process for evaluating consortium, which is going to be detailed in the NOFA, into consideration. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, the next question comes from Dion Alexander. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, but you're welcome to unmute and correct me and ask your question.
You're correct. Thank you so much. It's a follow-up, I think, to the last speaker, and I've not applied for Capital Magnet before, and I'm wondering if it precludes you from an FA application in the way that you cannot apply for FA and TA at the same time. Could you apply for both programs? Thank you.
Great question, Dion. 100%. Yeah, there's no preclusion between FA and Capital Magnet Fund. And the preclusion with FA and TA is basically their appropriations-based programs. And so their source of funding comes from the same source, and technical assistance has different goals and objectives than financial assistance. Since they're administered in the same round, you can only have one application there. That does not impact our Capital Magnet Fund program. So by all means, we have plenty of folks that apply for both programs, and we encourage you to do the same.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Mary Wong.
Yes, thank you. I guess my question is a follow-up to the one about the consortium approach. Will that be repeated in the next round? And what was the kind of rationale for implementing the consortium approach? Was that to allow lenders to partner with the developers? Because right now, I think there are like basically two pathways that the applicants are being evaluated, either as lenders or financial assistance providers, or as property developers or affordable housing developers. So what was the rationale for the consortium approach? And then the first part was, is it going to be repeated in 2024?
So again, we won't answer the question specifically about the 2024, but I will refer you back to the 2023 NOFA as a point of reference, but I can't say, we're not planning on changing it, but it is all subject to change until the actual NOFA comes out. So I want to clarify that. And why don't I tag in, Sarah, would you like to respond to the rationale for Mary?
Sure, and feel free to hop in if you'd like to add anything. The consortium approach allows those that may have less experience to work with each other to together form a pipeline and work together in unison to co-invest in projects to create more affordable housing units. So less about combining a financial entity approach and the developer approach, and more about allowing organizations to tap into each other's expertise and to co-invest into projects and to work in tandem on their pipeline. Andrew, anything you'd like to add to that?
Great explanation, Sarah, and case making. I would only add too that it was in perfect recognition that past CMF recipients have been co-investing in each other's projects historically for years. And so we have just basically formalized that programmatic feature, if you will, to recognize it upfront in the application, to give groups, credit for a shared pipeline and a shared track record, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of, there's meaningful co-investment, leveraging, the benefits of other organizations' pipelines, sort of tapping in, still following all the rules established in each individual assistance agreement, basically helping extend the CMF dollars even further by collaborating together. And so as a way of formally recognizing that, great tool, we decided to put it up front in the application and actually allow it, to groups to sort of collaborate. And to Sarah's point, the groups that got the award are going to be co-funding each other's projects and working collaboratively. But it's not, a lot of folks who come from sort of the HUD perspective will say, oh, well, it's not a true consortium, right? So we call it the consortium approach, right? And air quotes for added dramatic emphasis, it's an approach. So each organization still has to put in their own application. Each organization will have its own award, and each organization will have its own reporting requirements. But it's really this collaborative nature, again, to Sarah's good response there about recognizing the track record and a shared pipeline for, other organizations.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And there's a good PowerPoint too, right, from last year on this topic, Mary, that Joe will show us all how to navigate to before we adjourn.
Okay, great. I will look for that. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, terrific.
Does anyone else have a question? We just heard from Mary, and I don't see any other hands up right now, but while we have some time, I will navigate to some of those consortium approach resources so that you can see where they are.
And Joe can also show us all where this recording will be posted afterwards. So Joe will give us a little cruise through our great CMF website.
Okay, so I'll start at the homepage while we have a few minutes here. Again, feel free to raise your hand if you have another question. So when you first get to our website, you're on this beautiful page. If you go to programs and training, you can find the Capital Magnet Fund. And then that takes you to our landing page, and then scroll down. You'll find this nice step timeline, and that takes you to what I showed earlier. So step 1, certification, which you don't necessarily have to be certified to apply for our program, as you'll read in last year's NOFA, but it is step 1 nonetheless. Step 2 is what we're going to be updating for 2024. So sometime next week, we will post the recording to this webinar, as well as the presentation deck, which will have all the hyperlinks that you can access. And we will be updating these 6 modules as well, which is kind of like a self-study way that you can learn more about the Capital Magnet Fund. Then once the NOFA is released and the application is live, all of this stuff on kind of the second 2/3 of the page will be updated with fiscal year 2024 information. But as we've been saying, if you want to get a feel or get oriented early, all of these are really great resources. If reading a NOFA directly in the legalese is a little intimidating, which we understand, I recommend the glossary or the frequently asked questions as a way to kind of familiarize yourself, as well as, again, these modules are very easy to digest as well. And what Andrew was referring to earlier was this webinar here. So these are all the webinars we did last year once the application was open. So they're last year's presentations as well, but this was, I think, the consortium approach resource that Andrew was referring to. And if you want to listen to us read you the slides, there's a link to the presentations on YouTube as well. All right, I see a couple of hands. Okay, I will open the floor again and stop sharing. All right, so Janine, Betsy, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, my question was that the civil rights form, it applies whether you're a CDFI or if you're applying as a nonprofit developer. Is that correct?
Hi, yes, that's correct. It is for all applicants going forward for the CDFI fund grant programs.
And then I had one other question, and it's about the rents as they're calculated. It uses the language calculated the same as LIHTC rents. Is it reasonable to assume it's a similar number? And the second part of the question, the more important part, is does it work like the LIHTC rents work on a Section 8 project where the AMI of the person just can't pay more than their 30% rent per se? And if Section 8 covers the difference and that's beyond the LIHTC rent, but the renter doesn't pay more than 30%, is that permissible?
Well, this is a good question. I'm going to look to anyone who would want to posit an answer. The short answer is there are some important distinctions between, LIHTC at 60% AMI and CMF at 50%. There's differences currently with the way that the CMF program. So it's not like you can just port over and assume that the same income levels are being served. That would be the first observation based on your question. The second observation would be that, yes, the calculation method for, how you compute area median income would be, a shared definition. And we would point you towards the assistance agreement as a source for how you would calculate that. So Joe, if you actually want to, because again, back to teach people how to fish. We would have the assistance agreement from last year would be a good reference point. And for folks that are new to the program, this is basically if you are given an award and when you do apply, this is the instrument that's your agreement between your organization and the federal government on how to calculate and how to monitor and what compliance is. And so this is the assistance agreement that Joe brought up, and we would then look up the calculation of eligible income LIHTC program. There was LIHTC program for rental affordable housing units. You just had it, Joe, sorry. So this is a large document, I would say. It's whatever it's, this is the template. It's like 90 pages just as the template. Oftentimes these nuanced questions, this is what the program team is responsible for researching and getting you the answer to this. And this is a resource that I just encourage everyone who's on the call. A lot of these questions, they're governed by by this article here. And so you would find the response. You actually had it pulled up there, Joe, in the first instance. Can't remember exactly where you were. Was this Angela asking the question?
Wherever I was, it wasn't there on purpose. So unless there's a
Okay.
keyword you want me to search, I don't know if I can get back there successfully, quickly.
Was LIHTC on there? LIHTC's in the table of contents.
That took me to a LIHTC definition that referred to
Oh.
something else.
The first word I asked you to eligible income. There it is. So for rental affordable housing units, the 10 income is reexamined. Oh, sorry.
Just to, since we are here live and I know other folks have questions, should we just have a service request submitted and we can get back?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to demo for everyone on the call, like the answer will be in the assistance agreement. I guarantee it. And I just wanted to show people the exercise that is necessary to go through. This is what the CMF team will do, but by all means, Sarah's 100% correct. We will research this and get back to you if you put your question in writing. And you can probably find it yourself too, now that we've navigated to this assistance agreement. And then just in, last remark on this, basically the assistance agreement gets, turned over year over year over year, and it will match the terms of the NOFA. But this is basically the guiding document for people that are new to the whole, federal grants administration program. This is basically your agreement with the CDFI fund. If you are given an award, this explains all of the rules. And so, if you're new to the program, I would and you're thinking about applying because it's a pretty substantial application, average burden time is significant. Read the assistance agreement. And if there are things in the assistance agreement that you're not comfortable with or, want to better understand, ask the question, before you make the investment in applying. And so that's why I kind of wanted to walk you over here. Was that a helpful non-answer? And we will get you the specific answer if, yeah.
There's also, if you really want to get into some stuff, a great step 5 is all about compliance. And this resource right here, under the first one under general compliance resources, is our frequently asked questions. So if you're already very familiar with the wonderful world of affordable housing and have some detailed questions, there's lots of very detailed stuff in this FAQs, as well as our application ones. Next question goes to Angela Lindu.
Thank you. Yes, that's right. I just have a quick question about the kickoff webinar. Will that occur shortly after the publication of the minutes of the average time between the publication and the offering of that kickoff webinar?
Yeah, great question, Angela. So, right, our goal is usually within a week of when the NOFA gets published, and all of that information will be communicated in the NOFA itself. And then if you're signed up for our .gov delivery system, which Joe can show you if folks are not yet signed up, you can join the mailing list. And as soon as the NOFA gets published, as soon as those webinars get scheduled, you will receive a notice. But it's typically within the week of the NOFA publication. Give folks a chance to read the NOFA and then to show up to that kickoff presentation.
Great.
Yeah, of course.
All right, if anyone else has a question, please raise your hand. Gov Delivery, if you need to sign up for it, so you go anywhere from the CDFI Fund website here, you go to subscribe up here in the upper right. That takes you to this page, and that's how you sign up to receive emails. And then I think once you do it, you can like select which specific programs you might be interested in, but don't quote me on that. You might just be getting everything once you sign up. So good to stay informed.
Cornucopia of information. Plenty.
Any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any other hands, team.
Excellent. Well done, everyone. Thank you all for joining us, participating, the team for presenting all this great content. We're really excited to launch into another round. Stay tuned, sign up for the .gov delivery, get your SAM account in order if you've not started that, and tune in, more information forthcoming. Thanks again for everyone's participation. Reach out with service requests, send us an email. We're eager to support your success in administering the Capital Magnet Fund program. It's the best known secret. It's not really a secret. It's a great affordable housing program that is offered through the CDFI Fund, and we love talking about it and helping people be successful in accessing the resources for your communities. So with that, we'll adjourn and we will see you next time. Date to be determined. Sorry, no more specific information, but hope everyone has a lovely afternoon. Thank you.